So next up we have EPCOT, which when it opened was called EPCOT Center. This is the park that I have maybe the best memories of from when I was a child. It was the second park that opened in Walt Disney World, and I believe it opened in 1981 or 82, I can't remember exactly. But for a long time it was sort of thought of as the educational park, quote unquote. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it when I was a kid. I think I may have been in the minority on that though, as almost every change since then has been to eliminate the more educational aspects and make it a bit more Disney-esque like the other theme parks, with popular characters and rides based on those. This is also the park map of the three that I have here that has probably changed the most since 2017, especially in this area. Almost none of this is exactly the way it is here currently, but we will talk about it as it existed in 2017. So this map is laid out a little differently, whereas we entered here in the Magic Kingdom, the entrance for EPCOT is actually at the top of this map. For EPCOT, you can actually drive, and park would be right here, and there's a really giant parking lot where you can get here from other resorts and other theme parks via the monorail or the bus system. You can actually walk here as well from some of the resorts that are nearby. I believe the Boardwalk Resort and Beach Club and the Dolphin and Swan hotels are among the ones that have this walking path that lead into this part of the park, which is what most people would think of as the back of the park. But we'll start at the main entrance. There's a monorail station right outside the entrance where you can board to get to the Magic Kingdom or the resorts that are around the Magic Kingdom. And when you return to EPCOT, the monorail track enters the park and goes around this front section, which is a really nice view at night, or in the daytime, but especially at night. So the first thing you see when you arrive is the giant golf ball, which is, I think, what it's most famously known as. But inside the large geodesic dome, or sphere, I should say, is a ride called Spaceship Earth, which is still one of my all-time favorite Disney attractions. And it was there on opening day. It's one of the few remaining things in the front part of the theme park. So the front section, as of 2017 and before, was called Future World. And you have a series of pavilions around, each one containing an attraction or two, along with sometimes restaurants and shops. So let's say we go counterclockwise this time. So from Spaceship Earth, we would first come across the seas with Nemo and friends. This pavilion used to be called the Living Seas, but there's now a Nemo ride, and thankfully it still retains the something like 4.5 million gallon aquarium, which I believe is still the second largest aquarium in the United States. Some really cool sea life inside the building. And there's also a restaurant called the Coral Reef Restaurant, which I've never eaten in, but it seems to mainly get negative reviews. So I'm not sure I've missed much there. Continuing on, the next pavilion is called the Land. And inside the Land you have one of the most popular rides in Disney World, which is called Soarin'. It's a very fun ride where it feels like you're gliding in a hang glider over various landmarks on the planet. There's also a small boat ride that is called Livin' with the Land that takes you through the active greenhouses where they grow vegetables and do a little bit of fish farming. A lot of these things they grow here, they're trying new techniques for produce, and that produce gets used throughout the restaurants in Walt Disney World. There's also a nice food court inside here called Sunshine Seasons. I would say some of the better quick service, fast food type meals. A bit healthier options as well. Continuing around, we have the next pavilion, which is called Imagination. Inside this pavilion, there's a ride called Journey into Imagination with Figment. Figment was really the main character for EPCOT when it opened. He was created specifically for this pavilion and that attraction, and is still very popular among people who visited in the 80s and today. And those are the main pavilions in Future World West. So in the center here, there's a fountain called Fountain of Nations. And I'm actually not sure that's still there. I would have to check on that. As I said, this center area especially has been almost completely redone in the past few years. But on each side in 2017, we had these buildings, which were called innovations. You had innovations west and east, and they serve as sort of a corridor that leads into each of the Future World sections. They had shops and various exhibits. I remember one called the Home of Tomorrow or the Home of the Future, which was pretty interesting the first time I saw it, where they had voice-activated appliances and lights and things that we take for granted now, but it seemed at the time to be very futuristic. So in Future World East, starting at the top here, we have the universe of energy, which used to sort of give an inside look at fossil fuel production and maybe future ways of powering things on Earth. Now this is a new mega ride based on the Guardians of the Galaxy. The next building over is the Festival Center, which is really only open during certain times of year, like the Flower and Garden Festival or the Food and Wine Festival. At one time, this was another active pavilion with attractions, and it was based on the human body. Continuing this way, we have the Mission Space Pavilion. And this is a ride that simulates a journey into outer space. There are actually two versions. One uses a spinning centrifuge that makes it feel as if you are being affected by high gravity, such as takeoffs and landings on a spaceship. And the other is the same ride, but without the centrifugal force. When the ride opened, it only offered the centrifuge as an option, but a lot of people were getting very sick on it, and I want to say even if maybe a few people died based on pre-existing health conditions. So now they offer a milder version. This actually sits on land that was at opening day or soon after a pavilion called Horizons, and it also had a ride of the same name in it. And it's one of those things that people who visited in the early and mid 80s still talk about today as one of their favorite attractions. And finally, in the Future World area, this is the test track, pavilion, and attraction of the same name. And the premise is you are designing a vehicle and then taking it through real-world tests, some of which are inside the building, and then it ends with a very exhilarating speed test on the outside before ending. This is another very popular ride that has long wait times most of the day and is frequently broken down. So the other area of the park is called the World Showcase, and this thankfully has not changed much since the opening of EPCOT. It was envisioned originally and I suppose still is, as a sort of permanent World's Fair. And around this lagoon, you have various pavilions that are each dedicated to a different country and culture. The idea being that you can visit a lot of different places in one day and hopefully learn about their customs and people and foods. And it's just generally a nice stroll around the promenade. So we will go clockwise, which is normally the way that I would go. So coming from Future World, we first end up in Showcase Plaza, which has 2 stores with mostly clothing items. And then as we go clockwise, the first pavilion we run into is Mexico. Mexico is situated inside a sort of replica of an Aztec temple. It's a pyramid, and on the inside it is built to look like you are on a sort of city street market at night. So inside it looks like it's nighttime all the time. There's an attraction in the Mexico Pavilion called the Grand Fiesta Tour, starring the 3 Caballeros. It's just a small little slow boat ride that features the characters from the Disney film The 3 Caballeros, including Donald Duck. There are also, as you might imagine, a few really good restaurants with Mexican food on both the inside and outside. There's a sit-down restaurant and tequila bar inside, and on the outside there's another sit-down restaurant and another quick service attached to the same building here on the water. It's just generally a fun atmosphere. You can often see a mariachi band playing around the outdoor dining area. Continuing along the walk, which by the way is about 1.5 miles all the way around, we come to Norway. So Norway has an attraction or ride that is now based on the movie Frozen, called Frozen Ever After. And as you might imagine, that's a fairly popular attraction with the younger kids. There's also a buffet-style restaurant and a really good cafe called the Kringla Bakery Og Cafe. I apologize for pronunciations. There's also a neat little exhibit that some people may not know you can actually go into, but it's a stave church that has Viking memorabilia and artifacts inside, and anyone is welcome to go in and look around. Continuing, we next get to China. the Chinese pavilion does not have a ride attraction per se, but it does have a 360-degree film called Reflections of China, which showcases places and people of the country. There are also 2 restaurants in this pavilion. One is a quick service and one is a sit-down type restaurant. And there is a shop that features items and decorations, clothing based on Chinese culture and style. Continuing along the path, the next little place is called the Refreshment Outpost. This was originally supposed to be, I believe, an African style larger pavilion. I'm not sure if it was going to be based on a single country or just the continent generally. But in lieu of that, it now just serves as a sort of stopping post where you can get something to drink or a quick service meal. So the next country proper is Germany, which is always a fun time. Inside Germany, there is a buffet-style restaurant called the Beer Garden, which is a fun atmosphere. The setting is, again, it's sort of as if you are in a town square at night. And there is, most of the day, a sort of live folk-type band, polka band that plays in a small dance floor where you'll often see parents dancing with their kids. It's a very fun atmosphere, lots of toasting with large beer mugs. There are also several shops in the German pavilion and beer stand, pretzel stand as well. Continuing from Germany, we have Italy, which, as you might guess, has very food-focused representation. There is a really good pizza restaurant in the back called Via Napoli. There's another sit-down restaurant, and near the front you have a smaller replica of a plaza in Venice with a tower and a very large shop. Next along the path, in the center of the lagoon, so looking directly from Future World, this is what you would see in the middle is the American Adventure. It acts as a sort of host nation, since Walt Disney World is based in the United States. And here there are a few places to eat, and the main attraction is called the American Adventure. And it's a sort of animatronic show that follows some of the history of the United States. There's also a outdoor theater on the opposite side here on the water called the America Gardens Theater. And during festivals, this is where the bands will play live music. So, next up we have Japan. It's a very architecturally cool pavilion with some meandering paths and a koi pond that lead to a quick service restaurant. Near the back of the pavilion, we have a very large department store. And on the other side here, we have a few more restaurants. One is a sort of hibachi style, and the other one or two, I can't remember now. And things have changed a bit since then, but the other two are more fine dining. The next pavilion you would come to is Morocco, which has probably the coolest little internal hidden path system of all of the countries. Once you've done it a few times, it's maybe not as magical, but the first time you enter here, it just seems like it meanders with no particular direction, as if you were in an old Medina or market town. There's a restaurant on the water called the Spice Road Table, and another near the back called a restaurant Marrakesh. There's also a nice little cafe near the front called the Tangerine Cafe. And then throughout the rest of the country there are little market stalls and a replica of a Moroccan-style house and courtyard. Moving on from Morocco, you would get to France, which is a very popular pavilion for people to just sort of hang around. It has one of the larger sort of courtyard areas, so there's a lot of places for people to kind of sit on walls and around fountains and on benches. In 2017, the main attraction was a film called The Impressions of France. Now there is a completely new section in the back here that adds a couple of new attractions, like I think there's a new creperie, and the main attraction is a ride based on the film Ratatouille from Pixar. It's a really fun ride. But again, in 2017, that was not built yet. France also has a really good and popular spot for a quick bite with some delicious baked goods. It's a little quick service place called Léal Boulangerie Patisserie. And there is also a small little ice cream shop. And I believe still a perfume shop as well. There is a forced perspective replica of the Eiffel Tower near the back of the pavilion, so that when you are standing in the front, it looks as if you're seeing the Eiffel Tower in the distance. It's a nice little touch that Disney Imagineers are very good at. So after France, we continue along the path And the next country is the United Kingdom. On the water side, we have a pub, which is the Rose and Crown. And attached to the pub is the Rose and Crown dining room, where you can have a full meal. And if you're looking for something quicker, there is the Yorkshire County Fish Shop, which I believe only serves fish and chips, and they are very tasty. Opposite the water side, there is a little English village with a few different architectural styles and gardens, English gardens. There are a few clothing stores here. I know one of them has a lot of sports gear or kit from English football teams. And then in the back there is a small little area for live band performances. And at one time they, I believe, were planning on converting this into a Mary Poppins themed attraction, but I think that has been canceled. Continuing on from the UK, we next have a little off the beaten path pavilion that's called the World Showplace Events Pavilion, and it's really only open during festivals and super busy times of year. But the next country is Canada, which is the final country on the clockwise tour. Canada has a lot of rock work to simulate their part of the Rocky Mountain Range. And there's a waterfall, and underneath the rockwork and water area in the back there is another attraction, which is a tourist film for Canada that shows the people and places. And it's another 360-degree theater. There are a few building styles here to represent different areas of the country. A couple of shops, and just outside on the main path there is a live music stage. Canada has one of the most popular restaurants in EPCOT, which is called Le Cellier Steakhouse. It's often booked months in advance for dinner. I've eaten there a couple of times, and while it's okay, I'm not quite sure what the big to-do is about it. But on the path to Le Cellier, there is a nice little homage to the Bouchard Gardens in Victoria, Canada, which even outside of the Flower and Garden Festival is a really beautiful area of the park year-round. The gardens are immaculate and maintained. And after Canada, we arrive back at the Showcase Plaza, which then leads to the central courtyard of Future World and back to the entrance and exit. EPCOT has one of the better nighttime park closing shows in the World Showcase area here. They have a very large fireworks and laser show that happens every night, I believe at 9 o'clock. And there are lots of good views from around the promenade. But they tend to start filling up an hour or two before the show, so something to keep in mind. But there we have EPCOT. As it was in the year 2017.